This is Justified by Jury, and today we're going to switch it up and do a little something different. Now, I've created 2 episodes of my series called Unfortunate Demise. One for R&B rapper Lisa Lopez, and another for R&B singer Leah LaBelle. However, though it's important to spread awareness of the unfortunate demise of some artists, it's equally as important to celebrate the triumphant arise of other artists. Ones who faced adversity and were the underdogs for a period of time, before they would eventually ascend out of the ashes and be avenged from the troubles of their past. A prime example of an R&B songstress who would arise from these trenches is none other than LeToya Luckett, who rose to fame in the late 90s with girl group Destiny's Child. In today's episode, we will detail her humble beginnings, her rise and fall from fame, and her overall determination to overcome her odds and become the superstar that she is today. If there are any artists you would like to see me cover in the Unfortunate Demise series or the Triumphant Arise series, please let me know in the comment section below. Let's get started. LeToya was born on March 11th, 1981 in Houston, Texas, as the oldest of 2 children. As a child, she knew she was destined to be a singer. She grew up singing in her local Brentwood Baptist church and sang her first solo at the age of 5. She recalled the lady just giving her the mic one Sunday and telling her to "Go on, baby." And she won the congregation over with her small yet mighty voice. Shortly thereafter, she joined the children's choir and began performing in plays at her elementary school.
One day at school, LeToya met a new friend who would forever change her destiny.
I was going to my seat, and I look up, and there's a girl in my seat. I'm like, "Teacher, somebody's in my seat," whatever. Come to find out, it was Beyonce. I found out that she could sing. She found out that I could sing.
As fate would have it, Beyonce and LeToya would later audition for the same roles in a school play. The casting director loved both their performances so much, it was decided that one girl would play the role on Friday night and the other on Saturday night. Impressed with her overall talent, Beyonce invited LeToya to join her singing group named Girls Time. They had just performed on Star Search and lost to a rock band. Devastated, the girl group had underwent a few changes and were down to 3 girls, and LeToya's addition would complete them as a quartet called Something Fresh. The new group consisted of Beyonce as the lead singer, Kelly as the second lead vocalist of the group, LeToya as soprano, and LaTavia as the rapper of the group. The group at the time was managed by Andretta Tillman and Brian Moore, with Beyonce's father, Matthew Knowles, seeking a permanent position on the management team. However, the managers declined to put Matthew on the team because that created a conflict of interest. But when he threatened to remove Beyonce, who at this time was the most integral piece of the act, they gave in to his demands and he slowly took over controls, eventually in every aspect. He set up boot camp style rehearsals at his house, where the girls would undergo grueling, intense sessions of artist development that lasted hours on end. Yet the girls were very determined to make it big. Not to mention, these were preteens, so they had a lot of energy. They would show up to auditions, and if Matthew thought they weren't fully prepared, he himself would cancel their auditions. They would be expected to sing at any point in the day at a moment's notice.
It was non-stop. It was non-stop. I don't care if we were in the airport. I remember being on an airplane, getting woke up out of our sleep, coming to the front of the plane. We sang the national anthem on the plane as people are trying just to have rehearsal, singing in front of people on the spot. We were singing hotel lobbies, wherever, whenever, we had to be on point.
All the hard, grueling work would eventually pay off. They would change their name to the Dolls and incorporate a hip, edgier image to mark their new journey as teenagers and to fit in with the ever-changing style of the mid-90s. They would sign their first record deal with Elektra in 1995, but the label didn't really know what to do with the girls due to their age. They were heavily criticized, and the label tried to fit the girls into a more manufactured image. According to the group's vocal coach, David Brewer, the label didn't want a rapper in the group. and were going to kick LaTavia out, but he pleaded with them and said, hey, this girl has been in this group since the beginning, and she deserves a chance. He asked them to give him 6 months to work with her and have her hone her skill, eventually singing alto and the low notes. However, even with the new shift in their image and their change in singing style, the group would still be dropped by Elektra Records the following year. At this point, the entire team was critical of the girls. However, with much perseverance and dedication, the girls would eventually overcome these harsh criticisms and sign with Columbia Records in 1997, this time under the name Destiny's Child, a name chosen by Beyoncé's mom, Tina Knowles. The breakthrough that the girls fought long and hard for was finally here, but the fame that was to come would also include a host of turmoil and an everlasting series of unfortunate events. The first of which would be the untimely passing of Andretta Tillman from lupus, which would be followed by Brian Moore stepping away from Destiny's Child as Matthew Knowles became more domineering and insistent on full control. With the girls' new contract agreement, Matthew made it known that each girl would have to sign a personal management agreement with him as well. However, LeToya's mother, Pamela, found that a bit too hasty, too quick, and wanted the agreement looked over by an attorney. Of course, this caused a bit of a rift in the Destiny's Child camp, as the girls were 16 and very eager to get the ball rolling. But as minors, their parents would have to have the final say-so to sign off on everything.
Pamela Luckett wanted the deal to be reviewed by an attorney.
Attorneys can really screw up a lot of stuff.
It became a really bad situation. They were looking at it like, wow, LeToya, you're stopping our deal here. And then, of course, she's looking at me at that age. What are you doing, Mom?
Eventually, the girls signed.
Pamela caved into the pressure and signed the agreement. Mind you, at this point, Kelly's mom was a nanny who had fallen on hard times, so Matthew persuaded her to give him full guardianship of Kelly, and she agreed. When Matthew tried to gain guardianship over LeToya and LaTavia, Pam told him, don't push your luck. Still, Matthew made it known that he was running the show. During the recording process, it was apparent that the team favored Beyoncé over every other member, as she would be singing just about all of the leads on most of the songs, and they were propositioning her to be the centerpiece, whereas LeToya, who could have easily sang lead on a number of songs, was designated to harmonies only. Vocal coach David Brewer said in his book, Raising Genius, that whenever Matthew came into the studio, that he would try to intimidate the other girls and deter them from acting out of their respective designated positions by criticizing their unique singing abilities. His plan was to have their voices be nothing more than complimentary to Beyoncé's, and strongly discouraged solos from any other member. Kelly had sang a full solo track called Never Had a Love Like Mine, which would ultimately be removed from the album as Tina Knowles felt the subject matter was just a little bit too mature and adult-like for the young girls. They replaced the song with another joint called Illusions, which would be the last track recorded for the album. Even though the first verse is sang by Kelly, Beyoncé would sing most of the lead, but the producer, Wyclef, was very adamant that each member contribute in some way. It featured his fellow rapper, Pras from the Fugees, who would have a back-and-forth scat with LaTavia on the bridge. Both of their vocals complemented one another, and Kelly on the pre-chorus. However, when it came time for LeToya to sing her part, Matthew had walked in and gave her a look that affected her overall confidence and performance. And Wyclef had picked up on the fact that LeToya wasn't performing her best, and he wasn't necessarily thrilled with what she gave. David Brewer said, hey, let me go in the booth real quick and help her out, give her a few pointers. But knowing that Wyclef and Matthew were listening in on the booth, instead of telling her what he was witnessing, he wrote on a piece of paper saying, I know Matthew is trying to intimidate you, but I'm on your side. Just ignore him and focus solely on me. And with that, her confidence came back, and she aced her part, which would be the echoes on the song. Even though this was a small victory, as time would eventually prove, the feeling of having an ally, someone in her corner, was ultimately what LeToya was longing for. From here, the group would take off. Their song Killing Time would appear on the 1997 soundtrack to Men in Black, and their singles for No 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 Part 1 and Part 2 would propel them to the top 10 hit status with part 2 hitting number 3 on the Hot 100. Their debut album was released on February 17, 1998. It peaked at number 67 on the US Billboard 200 and at number 14 on the US Billboard Top R&B Hip Hop Albums. It was actually more successful outside of the United States, where it reached number 16 on the Canadian Albums Chart, number 19 on the Dutch Mega Chart, and number 45 on the UK Albums Chart. The album would be certified gold by the Recording Industry Association in July 1998, and later earned a platinum certification for 1 million copies shipped. The girls were on top of the world, or so it seemed, but the girls were in the dark about many things going on behind the scenes. For one, they were working tediously, doing endless amounts of performances after performances after performances, but didn't know which shows they were being paid for and which shows were just promo shows. Apparently, Matthew's managerial contract exerted power of attorney, so they never saw contracts for performances ahead of time. They were just expected to show up and show out every time, but they weren't able to look at their finances, which caused a few of the members, most notably LeToya, to seek legal counsel to inquire about their expenses and give an audit on their finances, which would result in her having multiple qualms with management. She said in a 2001 Vibe article that her problems with the group stem from her refusal to just go with the flow. She said ultimately she had been kicked out 5 times. Anytime a contract would come up, Matthew would kick me out of the group because I wouldn't just sign anything. It was like a bad relationship. He would kick me out and then call me back a few days later talking about, I need you, I need you, I need you. What he needs is prayer, and he needs a hug. The first glimpse of this would occur shortly before November 13th, 1998, when Destiny's Child appeared at the MTV Europe Awards, with LeToya noticeably absent. When questioned on LeToya's whereabouts, the group said that she was sick. However, LeToya would later claim in a Sister to Sister article from June of 2000 that she was sitting at home watching them on TV feeling just fine, and that what really happened was that a new management stipulation had just come up, and because her mom wanted it reviewed by an attorney, Matthew had her removed from the group until he could come up with something to persuade her to sign it and be let back in. According to LaTavia, Matthew had a knack for convincing people, from promoters to executives to the parents of other group members, to just go along with his plan because, like I said, at the end of the day, he was running the show. But still, the general public would be blindsided by all of the success the girls were having and the family unit front that they would put on to insinuate that all was well in the world of Destiny. They would be featured on the Disney series Smart Guy, and the girls would perform an a cappella, and each got to try their hand at a little bit of acting, which would foreshadow its own future for LeToya.
A tape
of our band. We've been writing a lot of songs, and we feel that a person connected like you are, you can put it in the right hands. You know Wyclef, right? He'll be fine.
You're kidding.
Nah, we've been doing this for a while. We ready to blow up.
You mean you brought me all the way to this dance to give me a tape? This whole thing was a setup?
No, hold on. It'd only be a setup if you weren't getting anything out of this. We'll let you lay down background vocal.
I need some punch.
By early 1999, they would drop the single, Get on the Bus, which was featured on the Why Do Fools Fall in Love soundtrack, and their dancing of which was choreographed by Fatima Robinson and Aaliyah herself. They would get right to work recording their second album, which would be titled Writings on the Wall. It would debut at number 6 on the US Billboard 200, with first week sales of 133,000 units. Due to vigorous promotional activities and the success of its singles, the album sales continuously kept increasing within the year following its release. It peaked at number 5 on the Billboard 200 and has gone on to be certified 8 times platinum with worldwide sales of 13 million copies. They had dope songwriters and heavy producers like Kevin Shakespeare Briggs, Candy Burris, Missy Elliott, Rodney Darkchild Jerkins, and LaShawn Daniels. And even Beyonce herself would co-produce several of the songs. Their hit, Bills, 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 was released as the lead single. It was a huge commercial success and became their first #1 single on the US Billboard Hot 100, and also topping the R&B charts for 9 weeks.
The song we're soon gonna hear is Bugaboo.
Bugaboo.
What is a bugaboo?
Bugaboo would be the second single. It peaked at number 33 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and number 15 on the US R&B Hip Hop. Internationally, it peaked within the top 10 in the Netherlands and in the UK. Their singles reflected their hard work that they had put in. The girls were more hands-on with this record this time around, with each member sharing writing credits on many of the songs. However, while the girls' voices were more prominent on this album, LeToya's presence was still designated to background vocals and harmonies only. Sure, she had more vocals than the last album, but still in the background nonetheless.
I didn't know nobody else could sing. So I remember, I don't know what city I was in. Did they
y'all
have...
wasn't hearing the harmonies?
No, listen, nigga.
Y'all wasn't hearing the harmonies?
There's harmonies, and then there's...
Nigga might have heard harmonies.
We was in there.
I'm from the streets. I don't hear no harmonies. So
I was told by somebody in the group, you don't even do enough in this group to even have an opinion.
Unfortunately, what LeToya and LaTavia failed to realize is that even though they are singers and they can hear themselves and they know what to look for, who's singing soprano, who's singing alto, who's singing different parts, right? The general public doesn't have a trained ear to pick out whose vocals are whose, unless of course the person is singing lead. Because Beyonce sang mostly lead on all of the hit songs where her face would be featured at the front, most fans and the public in general just assumed it to be another Jackson 5 type group where you have one lead singer and a bunch of background dancers lip syncing to her vocals. Sure, LaTavia may have sang lead on Sweet 16, but Beyonce sang the leads on all of the hit songs, and it was strategically set up that way. The only time anyone else would sing was Kelly on Bills, Bills, Bills on the pre-chorus. This translated to the general public believing that anytime they didn't hear Beyonce's voice, that they were hearing Kelly's voice. But ultimately, Beyonce being the star and everyone else being virtually disposable. And even though LeToya and LaTavia maintained that they were content in their positions as long as they were being treated right, unfortunately, background vocalists get background treatment. As a matter of fact, the only song in which everybody sang lead was a song called Can't Help Myself, which was only made available at a certain store in a certain city at a certain time in which the release was made available, and it was limited. So it's safe to say the girls didn't get much of an opportunity to showcase their own unique abilities and talents. I will say that watching some of their old performances, it became quite redundant after a while when you've got 4 beautiful young women up there and only one singing pretty much everything. Sure, every blue moon, Kelly would come to the front, say her 2 or 3 lines, but then would quickly retreat back to her designated spot in the background as they continue the performance. And it's just happened so frequently that after a while it was like, man, is anybody else gonna say anything for more than just 10 seconds? Are the other 2 girls gonna ever say anything? Are we gonna ever be able to hear them? After a while, the internal infighting shifted from it just being LeToya and LaTavia against management to now LeToya and LaTavia versus Kelly and Beyonce. It was set up that way by the adults in the situation. Sometimes when an adult figure can't gain control of a teen's actions, they will pit the teens against one another in a divide and conquer style format. Naturally, Beyonce would be defensive of her father like any child would at that age. And Kelly felt an obligation to Matthew's demands because, for one, he was her guardian, and then for 2, she was very timid and would often cry when he would badger her. But she was 100% loyal to him. So if LeToya and LaTavia have gripes with him, then LeToya and LaTavia have gripes with B and Kelly. Things took a turn for the worst when Destiny's Child did a joint tour venture with the group Jagged Edge. LeToya and LaTavia happened to be dating the twin brothers Brian and Brandon Casey in the group. According to Beyonce, the twins got into LeToya and LaTavia's heads and the girls lost focus and became less preoccupied with rehearsals and singing and more preoccupied with their relationships and being on their phones. According to Matthew, the remaining members of Jagged Edge were trying to holla at B and Kelly, but the girls weren't interested. Things came to a head in the fall of 1999 when LeToya, who's asthmatic, was having a bit of an episode and her mother came to her aid and planned to ride in their tour bus overnight just so she could catch the group's show and show the group's chaperone how to properly give LeToya her medicine. But Matthew, who had never been a fan of Pamela and felt his authority was always threatened whenever she was around, used the excuse that she wasn't covered by the insurance agency to ride the bus as a reason to have her forcibly removed from the bus by law enforcement. Of course, this whole ordeal caused a major feud between the camps of Jagged Edge and Destiny's Child, because the boys weren't going to let one of their girlfriend's moms be kicked off the bus. And because once again Matthew didn't get his way, he had to remove someone. And because tensions had been rising and Matthew felt like people were attacking him, he did what he did best by having Jagged Edge axed from the promo tour, which angered LeToya and LaTavia. Yet and still, they had the hits. So even though they were furious, they still had to put on a smiley face in front of the cameras and pretend all was peachy and fine while riding the success of 2 chart-topping singles, and even try to keep their cool around B and Kelly. Meanwhile, they were privately seeking out legal counsel to figure out the best way to disaffirm their management agreement with the domineering Matthew Knowles and bring another manager in who had their best interests at heart, similar to the way that they originally had it with Andretta Tillman and Brian Moore before Andretta's unfortunate passing and before Matthew overtook everything. Because at the end of the day, they were the artists and he was just their manager. Managers can be replaced, right? On December 1st, 1999, Destiny's Child would perform at the Music with a Message benefit concert for AIDS for what would be their last performance with their original lineup. Immediately following this, LaTavia would fall ill with a fever of 104 and had to be rushed to the hospital.
You got the phone call that LaTavia was very sick, and the next day we were going on our European tour, and we were all like, well, what are we gonna do? We can't go. And he was like, well, Janella, the choreographer, can take her place.
I was shocked. I was literally floored. I have 104 fever. I can't leave.
They really didn't understand still the necessary personal sacrifices they had to make to really become great at this.
You know, this is our group member. You can't just replace a group member because she's sick. She's in the hospital.
It makes you feel like, was it worth it? Was it, not?
The group would carry on the European tour as a trio, as LaTavia stayed home and recovered. They stopped in Sweden, and in their last interview with LeToya, they were asked to describe her.
LeToya is the energetic, happy one of the group. When everyone else is feeling kind of sad, or if the day is going bad, then LeToya always bring up a memory or something to make us laugh. Or when we're watching movies or something, she'll always find something in the movie to point out that'll make us laugh, and she's just always bringing in laughter.
She's like the Jim Carrey of the group. LeToya's silly.
They were still sisters at heart and loved each other, even though the business side of things had drove a bit of a wedge between the girls. Unfortunately, things were about to go down the rabbit hole, and Destiny's Child, as everyone knew them, would never be the same. Their tour wrapped up on December 13th, 1999 in Houston. And on the very next day, LeToya and LaTavia sent letters to their record company effectively ending their management agreement with Matthew. He received a letter from an attorney stating that from this day forth, the attorney would be their new manager on an interim basis until they get a more permanent new manager. Since the girls were now 18, they were no longer bound to his agreement that they signed as minors. Alas, after all their pain and strife, they would finally be able to work, get paid, know the ins and outs of their dealings, and not be under Matthew's or any of the current management's reign. Seemed like a checkmate move, right? Sadly, they were about to find out the unfortunate lessons of playing hardball with the Joker himself. And now that they were adults, he wasn't going to exercise any kind of restraint when he let the hammer fall. So instead of writing the girls back once they had submitted their letters, a rep for Destiny's Child informed this new attorney/manager that Destiny's Child would be canceling all shows for the foreseeable future until they get this matter resolved. Meanwhile, Matthew told Beyonce and Kelly to suit up and continue performances as a duo for the remainder of December and all throughout January of 2000. Now, this was before the age of social media, but that did not stop rumors from getting back to LeToya and LaTavia from people who said, "Hey, I went to go see Destiny's Child in Dallas. Where were you?" Or, "Hey, did you guys spot B and Kelly performing at Texas A&M?" But still, LeToya and LaTavia didn't believe the rumors because they hadn't heard anything from the Destiny's Child camp about any shows. As far as they knew, Everything was canceled and everybody was on standby. But before they knew it, they would receive a call in early February of 2000 from someone saying that they had just come back from a Destiny's Child music video shoot for Say My Name, and that Beyonce and Kelly were singing alongside two new girls that had replaced them. At this point, LeToya figured, these rumors had gotten stupid creative.
At first I was like, nah, you playing, shut up. I was like, hold on. I was like, it's not true. Then we got another call and we heard it again. Then the next thing I'm looking at BET. The premiere of Destiny's Child's new video, Say My Name. That's how we heard about it.
In one of the most infamous and shadiest moves ever, Matthew had LeToya replaced by Michelle Williams, who was a backup singer for Monica, and LaTavia replaced by Farrah Franklin, who had appeared as an extra in the Bills, Bills, Bills video, and had the girls find out when the video premiered on BET. Finding out that they were dropped like a bad habit from this union that they were a part of for over 7 years, and to just be replaced without their knowledge was one of the hardest pills to swallow, and things only got worse. Wanting to get some kind of justification, the only people they could turn to at this point was their label for answers, but they were met with more alarming news. Apparently, Matthew had informed Columbia Records' parent company, Sony Music, that LeToya and LaTavia had missed an array of performances and failed to fulfill their contract obligations, which prompted them to then be dropped from the label. Apparently, all of those performances that B and Kelly were doing on their own made it look like LeToya and LaTavia hadn't shown up for work. Apparently, when LeToya and LaTavia disaffirmed their management agreement with Matthew, they practically asked to be dropped from the Destiny's Child franchise. Because unbeknownst to anyone at the time, Matthew had acquired the trademark for Destiny's Child back in 1998. And because the girls were minors at that time, their parents would have had to sign off on it, but their parents were completely in the dark about it. Therefore, anything with the name Destiny's Child on it, for now and for forever, belongs to Matthew and no one else, not even Beyonce. He would often tell the girls, "This is my group, and if you don't like my rules, you can go find another job." Clearly, he meant it, and he meant it where it matters, which is on paper. Mortified, and with nowhere else to turn, LeToya and LaTavia felt like the Destiny's Child dynasty forced their hand, and they would file a lawsuit in March of 2000 against Sony Music, Matthew, Beyonce, and Kelly for breach of partnership, defamation, libel, and fraud. But as the drama ensued, Destiny's Child only continued to profit off of the success of their single and the drama that kept them in the conversation. Say My Name was the most successful single on the album, becoming Destiny's Child's second #1 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and reaching top 10 in Australia, Belgium, Canada, France, Iceland, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, and the United Kingdom. Critically acclaimed, it would go on to win 2 Grammy Awards for Best R&B Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocals and Best R&B Song, while also being nominated for Record of the Year and Song of the Year. Equally, Jumpin' Jumpin' became a commercial success as well, peaking at #3 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and within the top 10 in Australia, Canada, Iceland, the Netherlands, New Zealand, and the UK. The song was ranked number 232 on Pitchfork's Top 500 Songs of the 2000s. While the new members were riding high on the wave of success built off the backs of the former members, one of the girls, Farrah Franklin, started to feel the pressures of the group's grueling schedule and Matthew's hasty demands. She had officially became a member on February 13th, 2000, but on July 13th, 2000, after she had suffered from dehydration and a stomach virus, management had pulled her into a room where they berated her and accosted her, as they felt that she was spoiled, ungrateful, and behaving like the former members, which would lead to Farrah storming out of the room and announcing that she quit. This, of course, was embarrassing for Destiny's Child, but in typical fashion, the same way that Matthew exclaimed to Sony that LeToya and LaTavia were missing shows, would be the same way that Destiny's Child would announce to the public on TRL that Farrah had been missing shows and that they were forced to terminate her because she hadn't shown up for work, when in fact, she walked out on them.
All of the bad seeds are now out of Destiny's Child. We've had changes in the group, and we finally found the recipe that is perfect.
R&B singer Aaliyah had been the only artist to check in with LeToya.
When I went through my situation, she was the only artist that called and asked me how I was doing and to check up on me and to make sure everything was okay. And like, everybody was, you know, trying to be, well, we don't know what's going on. She was the only artist that called me. It was like, I just want to call and see how you're doing. And that was so nice of her and so sweet of her. And I will never forget that girl. Ever.
It looked like Destiny's Child was this delegating act which would kick members out left and right. Destiny's Child did deal with a lot of backlash from the group's multiple lineup changes in just a 6-month period. People came to LeToya and LaTavia's aid. Jagged Edge helped them put together their own group with singer Natasha Ramos, and started gathering a few demos for the girls to sing while they get their image together. But they wanted to keep things private and on the hush-hush, while the flames from the Destiny's Child feud continued to blaze. There was a lot of back and forth in the media between both parties, and now with Farrah throwing salt in the wound on Destiny's Child, causing Destiny's Child to drag all 3 former members in a Vibe 2001 article where Beyonce said, "I never complained when you didn't sing one note on numerous songs on the album," referring to LeToya and LaTavia. She said, "Every 3 weeks or less there is drama caused by one or both of you. It has been this way for at least the past 2 years, and I don't deserve this." Kelly echoed these sentiments by saying, "I think it's so funny how every time there is something good going on with Destiny's Child, one of you will spring something on us, Beyonce and me. And before, I've tried to forgive and forget and move on, but I refuse to be run over and receive punches from y'all. Y'all have taught me to not take crap from anyone and to always watch your own back." Tina Knowles would jump in, saying that from the time that LeToya got into the group, there had always been drama, always jealousy, always madness. People don't know all the crap that we've been through with LeToya and LaTavia. Beyonce and Kelly kissed their butts all the time, spoke to them first, and then went into the studio and did all the work. Adding fuel to the fire, Beyonce went on to say that LeToya was like tone deaf. She wasn't even originally a singer, she was a rapper, Kelly adds. Now, the Vibe editor did eventually come out and say that for that particular portion, they had mixed the names up, and that Beyonce and Kelly said that it was LaTavia who was tone deaf and originally the rapper, as I had mentioned earlier. But the damage was done, and LeToya internalized these words with such hurt. These were her friends. And because she had issues with management then projected those issues onto Kelly and Beyonce, and had Kelly and Beyonce kind of going at LeToya and LaTavia. And it was very unfortunate for LeToya. She internalized these things and dealt with it differently. But their vocal coach David addressed the allegations, saying that Beyonce was completely out of line in saying that. "It's not true. It never has been true. There is nobody on this planet who knows their voices better than I do because I built all 4 of their voices. None of them are tone deaf. All of them can sing." He even noted that it was Kelly, not LeToya, who failed to get admitted to a performing arts program that Kelly, LeToya, and Beyonce all applied to during high school. But LeToya would come to her own defense and say, "We weren't lazy. When it was time to write, when it was time to sing, we were ready to go. I want to put somebody on the stand with the Bible and have them say that we didn't work." Throughout the constant back and forth between the group members, LeToya and LaTavia would eventually drop their suit against Beyonce and Kelly, but they still kept their suit against Matthew and Sony until they reached a settlement and both parties were satisfied with the overall outcome. Destiny's Child would appear at the 2001 Grammys to collect those awards that they won for Say My Name. LeToya and LaTavia would also be in attendance in their own union with new member Nadi Quinones, but would not be allowed on stage to accept the Grammys that they worked hard for. Meanwhile, Destiny's Child would be continuously pestered with questions and grilled about the feud with their former members. It was clear that in order to save face in the media, the Destiny's Child camp would present the manipulation tactic known as DARVO, which stands for deny, attack, and reverse the victim of offense. If they could present themselves as the actual victims in the situation and gain sympathy from the general public, it would help restore their image of sisterhood and girl power, as their sales themselves weren't negatively affected at all by the drama, but they still wanted to be seen as good and wholesome. But the girls really did press the sympathy card and try to push for the narrative that LeToya and LaTavia were the ones that had caused all this evil in the Destiny's Child camp. However, LeToya was not here for any of the DARVO tactics. She stated, "We had things taken from us, Nothing was taken from them except me and LaToya. And as y'all can see, they got over that real quick. Their dreams were not taken away or yanked out from up under them. Yet and still, Destiny's Child would only further propel their reverse victim tactic. They would drop the song Survivor, which would become the ultimate anthem for those who underwent hardships and overcame adversity perpetrated by those set out to destroy them. This anthem peaking at number 2 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and topping the charts in Ireland, Norway, and the UK, and ultimately winning Best R&B Performance by Duo or Group with Vocals at the 2002 Grammy Awards, only further added fuel to the fire. The lyrics, "You thought I wouldn't sell without you, sold 9 million, was a direct hit on LeToya and LaToya, which was real rich considering that it was LeToya and LaToya who were constantly tormented with the narrative that they were nothing without Matthew and would never amount to anything without being under his tutelage. With this, LeToya and LaToya would again file suit against Destiny's Child and Matthew, claiming that their anthem was a breach of their agreement and sought to have all live performances of the song halted. Unfortunately, their case was thrown out, which then prompted them to respond in a track called Moving On. By now, LeToya and LaToya had officially formed their new group called Angel with the help of Jagged Edge, which featured Nadi and a new member, Selena, who had been in a girl group with Kiki Wyatt and had also laid background vocals for Aaliyah on her song Journey to the Past. Selena said in her book Memoirs of a Diva that LeToya acted a little paranoid with our group, I guess as a result of the drama with Destiny's Child, which was totally understandable. We all got along very well with one another, which was important. However, LeToya and LaToya had 2 separate managers. As a matter of fact, everyone had separate management, and I did not see how that was going to work. LaToya was dating Brandon, and LeToya and Brian were no longer together. One day, Brian's girlfriend walked up the stairs calling LeToya in an angry, shaky voice. She was going for LeToya, and I stepped in front of LeToya and between them, and so did Nadi. The girl was upset, and she said what she had to say to LeToya, and then she left. LeToya had thanked us and said that she had never had anyone stand up for her like that before. Once again, LeToya felt protected for the first time in a long time. And after all the adversity she had been facing, it was a sigh of relief to feel a moment where someone had her back. She said that she stayed and recorded with them in Atlanta for about a month, and they did another photo shoot and all, but she wasn't really feeling it. And at this point, after being in a group with Kiki and being in another with LeToya and LaToya, she was really a solo artist, which would also prove to be true for LeToya. In time, Selena would eventually be replaced by a new member, Tiffany, and the group had finally found their perfect formula, as the group was now on its 4th lineup change. The group would go on to record a 22-song demo in Atlanta, did a number of photo shoots, and went on a few promo tours to promote themselves. The group also appeared in Jagged Edge video for Where the Party At remix. However, the production company, 581 Entertainment, which handled the group, collapsed, and it marked the end of their stint together. Their unreleased album, Heavenly, would be leaked onto the internet. At this point, LeToya was absolutely crushed with how things turned out for her. After a decade of putting her heart and soul into her work, she dealt with being ridiculed and abandoned by those she held close. She didn't really know where else to turn, and her self-esteem took a massive hit because of it. After taking the much-needed time to reflect, dwell, and cry it out, she picked herself back up and continued on with the fight. She would join with Noontime, an Atlanta-based management production company, and recorded a 5-song demo and eventually signed with Capitol Records in 2003. Soon after, she began working on her debut solo album. She had a few promo songs. She also managed to open a clothing boutique in 2004 called Lady L Boutique, in which she invested over $40,000 of her own money into the store. Even though by all outward appearances it seems like she was doing well for herself, by late 2005, she was practically homeless while attempting to put together her first album.
During my journey, I was staying at people's houses. I've never told these stories before. I slept in a car in LA.
Wow.
While I was making my first album. I was like drinking a gallon of water and buying the microwavable oodles and noodles, and I was like cooking them on the coffee pot in the hotel. I can't believe I'm crying.
Oh my God.
It was a lot.
Wow.
But I was uncomfortable for a minute.
Wow. I had no idea.
It would be apparent that the darkest hour was just before daybreak for LeToya, as her first single, Torn, became a massive hit, having high airplay and reaching number 11 on the US Hot 100 airplay charts. It also entered the top 20 on the Rhythmic Top 40 and Adult R&B charts. The video for Torn had one of its biggest successes on BET's 106 in Park, in which it was the #1 pick for 25 days straight. To build anticipation for her album, she did a 3-episode web series called H-Town Chick, explaining her role in Destiny's Child and detailing the recording process of her album. Her self-titled debut, LeToya, would debut at #1 on the US Billboard 200 and Billboard Top R&B Hip Hop Albums chart, with first week sales of 165,000 copies. On August 31st, 2006, it was certified gold and platinum on December 11th of 2006, making LeToya, along with Beyonce, the only 2 members from Destiny's Child to achieve this feat to this day. All was well that ended well for LeToya, up until it was time for her to sing live in front of big crowds by herself.
That's when it got real. I would have panic attacks in the bathroom. I was scared to go on stage. My voice would literally be shaking. Like, to be out there alone by myself and not have my girls up there with me. You know, I didn't know how to play that off.
She overcame fears that were embedded in her mind by Destiny's Child's management and naysayers that felt that she couldn't sing. Even though her next 2 singles, She Don't and Obvious, did not duplicate the success of her first single, Torn, mostly due to the merging of Capitol Records and Virgin Records halting all funding for promotional singles, she didn't let any of that stop her from trying her hand at a second album. On August 25th, 2009, she would release her second album called Lady Love, debuting at the top of the Billboard R&B Hip Hop's chart, where it spent a total of 32 weeks, and number 12 on the Billboard 200, where it spent a total of 12 weeks. The first single was called Not Anymore, and it was the most added song at Urban Radio as of February 28th, 2009, and one of the top 20 gainers on urban stations after an increase of 132 spins. And the video would premiere on BET's 106 in Park, which drew comparisons to Solange Knowles' music video, I Decided. However, Solange would come to LeToya's defense on Twitter. She wrote, "I think LeToya looks great in her new video. You people are reaching. I see LeToya every once in a while, around and about, and it is nothing but love." She went on to dispute the similarities. "I recorded the influence of my 60s sound 4 years ago, and that now is very common in R&B music and visuals. That ain't my sound." And I'm really thankful that Solange did that and came to LeToya's defense. Because once there was drama, people think that you were supposed to stay right where you fell. And people think that you're supposed to stay mad at somebody for something that happened years ago. And even though the qualms did not involve LeToya versus Solange specifically, the fact that Solange and LeToya are both adults about the situations, and it's really good to see people, especially women in music, having each other's backs. However, Capitol Records did not have LeToya's back and would continuously show a lack of support for her singles like She Ain't Got and Regret, the latter of which caused a rift between the label and LeToya's fans. It came to a head when it was revealed that the label had no intentions to release a video for the single called Regret, which featured the rapper Ludacris, despite its growing success on the Billboard charts off airplay alone. The fans fired back with an online petition stating, "We the fans and supporters of LeToya Luckett are extremely disappointed at the way the entire Lady Love project has been handled thus far." The third single, Regret, featuring Ludacris, has already shown its potential to become the next smash hit single. Ultimately, a video was granted for the single. However, it was released on November 11th, 2009, after it had peaked on the Billboard charts, and didn't do a whole lot, but the fans were appreciative that they at least got their video. And then the ultimate fan favorite joint, Good to Me, would be the last single released from the album, and that song, Good to Me, I wore that song out, y'all. That is the jam right there. I love a good woman that wants a good man. Just that whole overall message is refreshing to hear. But anyway, after dealing with the never-ending saga with a fickle music industry, LeToya decided to try her efforts at pursuing her other talents. She had already done a number of stage play shows, one in particular being J.D. Lawrence's Rumors, in which she played the character Michelle, from January of 2008 to March of 2008. But in late 2009, she would audition for the role of Angie King in The Preacher's Kid, which would become her breakout role. It's an American Christian drama film directed by Stan Foster, which was released to theaters on January 29th, 2010 by Warner Premiere. People were blown away at LeToya's performance, both vocally with the singing as well as acting. Both her and her co-star Tank put their heart and soul into this project. After being bit by the acting bug, she would go on to appear in several movies like The Killers with Ashton Kutcher, Note to Self, From the Rough, Where's the Love, Drumline 2, and a host of TV shows like Single Ladies, Rosewood, Greenleaf, and Second Generation Wayans. In 2015, LeToya and motivational speaker Rob Hill Sr. reportedly got engaged after a year of dating and secretly were married in January of 2016. But it was alleged that the pair had called it quits after only 2 months of marriage. In August of 2017, LeToya announced her engagement to entrepreneur Tamika Walker via Instagram. They were married on December 10th, 2017, and in June of 2018, the couple announced that they were expecting their first child together. Their daughter, Gianna, would be born on January 4th, 2019, and their son, Tyson, would be born on September 14th, 2020. However, on January 11th of 2021, just 4 months later, the couple had announced their divorce. Their rocky relationship was highly publicized on T.I. and Tiny's Friends and Family Hustle. After a number of failed relationships in the public eye, LeToya found herself back where she always found herself, at one. It was important that she started her healing journey from within and didn't seek fulfillment in outside sources. Her viral hit, Back to Life, harped on the importance of this. She would go on to start another web series called Leave It to Toya, which details her life, relationships, and past trauma. Her most watched episode deals with her tumultuous relationship with rapper Slim Thug, who she's still good friends with today. However, one of her deepest episodes deals with finding forgiveness with her father, who decided to part ways with his family when she was still in elementary school, and how his absence set the initial tone for her abandonment issue, and how the snowball effect of many similar life experiences ultimately led her down a path where she felt completely deserted. But perhaps, under the weight of it all, she hadn't been buried at all. Maybe she had just been planted, and it was up to her to allow the rain to propel her to bloom. If anything, her accomplishments are definitely a reflection of that. She would reunite and do several interviews with Kelly and even Michelle, who was once her replacement in Destiny's Child, demonstrating the power of forgiveness.
I'd also like to thank the original members of Destiny's Child, LeToya Luckett and LaTavia Robinson.
Throughout it all, LeToya has had her trials and tribulations, but she has shown time and time again her ability to rise above it all and conquer what's been set out before her. She still deals greatly with tribulations from her past, and every now and again they can cloud her judgment on her capabilities, much like we all do. However, she always manages to find her way back to herself. This is Justified by Jury. Y'all know how to hit that like. Y'all know how to hit that subscribe. If you want to, do so. I'll catch y'all on the next one.